Welcome, everybody, to this wonderful special edition of No Punt Intended. I'm Joshua Hudson. With me today is the full house of consensus rankers at Club Fantasy because we are holding ourselves accountable. Last week, we did our quarterback rankings, and this week, we're doing our running back rankings. And let me tell you, there were some misses, but you know what? There were some hits, too. Austin Amandolia is hosting. Ryan Weisse joins us. Joel Wirth, Chris Molina, Steve Lawson, myself. Let's go.
What's going on, everybody? I'm your host tonight, Austin Amandolia, here to talk running back ranking accountability. And boy, I had some major misses. Like it was like 2 weeks into the season. I was like, oh no, this is all over. So I'm going to first introduce our crew. For the first time, we have all 6 of our consensus rankers on one live stream. So I'm super pumped about that. First off, me, Austin Amandolia at Austin_FFL on Instagram and Twitter. Josh Hudson at the One Hudsonian, founder of Club Fantasy. Ryan Weisse at the Fantasy 5, one of our editors and co-host of Mock It Like It's Hot, coming soon to a station near you.
Yeah.
It's just YouTube. That's the station.
It's the only station.
Chris Molina at ChrisMo2413 on Twitter. Repping the LA Rams from 2 years ago. Steve Lawson at FF by Committee.
I have until the Super Bowl this year to just say we're the defending champs.
Soaking it in. You know, I understand that. Steve Lawson at FF by Committee. And at the Joel Wirth, our zero RB truther. And there will be plenty of opportunities to talk zero RB tonight. So, like I mentioned, we did rankings to start the year off before the season, and now we're just going to go. And I picked out some players that some of us really missed on, some of us got right, and we're just going to talk through those. So there's no true format. We're just going to have a conversation and hash it out. But first, Josh, introduce our sponsor.
Yeah, I gotta love those sponsor reads, right? This special edition of No Punt Intended is brought to you by Manscaped. Manscaped is the best in men's grooming. They offer precision engineered tools for your family jewels. They recently just launched the Ultimate Men's Hygiene Bundle, the Performance Package. It includes the Lawnmower 4.0, the Weed Whacker Ear and Nose Hair Trimmer, the Crop Preserver Groin Deodorant, the Crop Reviver Toner, Performance Boxer Briefs, and a travel bag to hold all of those wonderful goodies. Join over 5 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer just for you. Head over to manscaped.com. Use promo code CLUBFANTASY, as you can see on the ticker below. Enter in Club Fantasy at checkout. Save 20%. Get free shipping at manscaped.com.
I love it. We're going to dive right in now with our consensus rankings for the 2022 season. This is recapping how we ranked these players going into last year. And as so many people did, our number one running back was our man, Jonathan Taylor. And we will talk about him. But going through the rest of our consensus rankings, somehow, apparently, Najee Harris ended up number 2, which I feel kind of proud of that.
That's
Steve
our fault, Austin.
Happen.
That is our fault. 100% our fault.
So Najee Harris was RB2 in our rankings, followed by Austin Eckler at RB3. Christian McCaffrey fell to RB4 because of Joel. We're going to talk about that. Derrick Henry was RB5. Saquon Barkley, RB6. Aaron Jones at 7. Dalvin Cook at 8. Joe Mixon at 9. DeAndre Swift at 10. Javonte Williams at 11. We're not going to talk about Javonte Williams tonight because it's not fair. He got injured fairly early in the season, but that obviously ended up being a miss, mostly because of injury. And then wrapping up our RB1 consensus rankings was Alvin Kamara at 12. How it actually turned out
was not that.
Was not that. And we do full PPR rankings here at Club Fantasy. And so the full PPR results for the RB1 category starts off with Austin Eckler finishing RB1, followed by Christian McCaffrey finishing in second, which that's basically where a lot of us had him ranked because of Jonathan Taylor ahead, but I'm still taking the win because I had him ranked first. Josh Jacobs ended up RB3, and he did not make it on our show sheet tonight, but we should just shout out Josh Jacobs for the incredible season we did. And I'm going to shout out Josh for his pick on Josh Jacobs because.
And you know what's funny? I had him at RB19. Like, I wrote an entire article during the season that said, you know what? This guy has the chance to be an RB1. And in my projections, he fell all the way to RB19. So I'm like, what happened here?
You know, I
had him as high as 15 in the first go around with the rankings, but you know, is what it is.
That's what it is. But you were the Josh Jacobs truther in the offseason, I remember. Coming in an RB4 this season was Derrick Henry, which surprises me given how quiet it seemed he was this year. Like it seemed like people were down on him all year. Coming up in fifth, Saquon Barkley, pretty close on his ranking. RB6, Nick Chubb, which we are not talking about Nick Chubb, but I told y'all. RB7 was Ramondre Stevenson. RB8, Tony Pollard, followed by Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon at 10. Dalvin Cook fell to 11th, and Leonard Fournette made it up into the RB1 tier at RB12. Yeah, that one surprises me.
Well, when you really think about with Fournette, because there was just this battered and bruised month where everyone was calling for the Rachaad White takeover, and it kind of happened in the passing game and then didn't really happen, and then Fournette took it right back. And so, yeah, very strange to see him that high.
Yeah, Tampa Bay's backfield was weird. Also, how bad the Tampa Bay running offense was in general, but
horrendous.
And then their passing offense.
Yeah. The only thing worse than their running offense.
Fair. So we're going to start off talking about our RB1 from this past year and doing a little bit of accountability on that, because this year the dominant narrative in fantasy was Jonathan Taylor as the RB1 in rankings. He finished as RB33 and finished RB18 on a points per game basis. So points per game fairly well, but still not in an RB1 category. We can talk about the injuries, but even without the injuries, it seemed very unlikely that Jonathan Taylor would have repeated as the RB1. So before we get into, any of the people who voted for Jonathan Taylor as the RB1, Josh, I think first we should take our victory lap, because we had Christian McCaffrey as our RB1, and we outsmarted everyone, and we're like, oh yeah, Jonathan Taylor, nah, he's not repeating. Christian McCaffrey, that's our guy.
I mean, in reality, did we get it right? Because really, Austin Eckler was the RB1. But for everybody that's like, oh, Christian McCaffrey's injury prone, that's why I'm going to go Jonathan Taylor. Who got hurt this year? Stop with this injury prone narrative bullshit. Christian McCaffrey is the best all-around running back in football. It's not rocket science. It's exactly why he statted out as my RB1. And when you look at the splits and what he was trending towards in Carolina versus San Francisco, this is exactly how this season finished, was how he was trending. So I'm perfectly fine saying, you know what, he was my RB1, finishes the RB2 overall. Austin Eckler had another fantastic year of touchdowns. Give it up to him. That's what that offense was built for, is to get him in the end zone close. With what Christian McCaffrey does, not only in between the tackles, but also in the receiving game, to me, that will always warrant a top 3 pick. And I really do not understand the argument against that. Just my personal opinion.
Yeah. I mean, what can we say? Christian McCaffrey, he's the dude. He consistently averages 20 PPR points. Chris, let's come to you to talk about Jonathan Taylor for a minute, because you did have Jonathan Taylor ranked as the RB1. And again, we're going to set aside injuries here, but where do you think that this season went wrong for Jonathan Taylor, kind of repeating as that RB1 caliber fantasy asset?
Just as a side note, you and Josh were taking your victory lap with Christian McCaffrey being y'all's number 1, even though he finished number 2. But there's 2 rankers on here who actually had McCaffrey as number 2. Shout out Ryan.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, we don't really deserve a victory lap. Quote unquote.
You know
what? It's fun for a show. I'll take it. Whatever.
I mean,
but
the next session's about
anyways.
Najee Harris, and that's going to go really poorly for me. So I had to do something here.
Anyways, in terms of Jonathan Taylor, the Colts are just an absolute mess. Matt Ryan, big dumpster fire. The backup quarterbacks were even worse. So yeah, if he didn't get hurt, I agree with you. He may have cracked the top 10, but most likely he would have been an RB2 in like what was just a down year.
Yeah. Joel, how does it feel not having to have worried about this?
Joel,
I mean,
where did you
that's-
have McCaffrey?
Low, 24, something like that. But that was less a bet on him than that was more of a bet on Carolina. I mean, nobody saw him going to San Francisco, right? I didn't see him getting traded. I thought, honestly, that was a function of I thought Baker Mayfield would be okay, and that's the real miss on my part. Is I thought Baker Mayfield would be a functioning quarterback, and they would have a passing game, and they would use their wide receivers, and that would be a very different offense. And that didn't happen at all. So my dislike of McCaffrey wasn't the injury issue. It was a function of how he was going to work in that offense. Then bringing Deonta Foreman in, I thought they were going to use him as more of a goal line hammer type to kind of take the injury risk away from McCaffrey's. Didn't turn out. So, and that's why I don't draft running backs, because that's part of the zero RB thing is they do get hurt a lot and they don't turn out a lot, but sometimes you just got to go with your strengths and know where you're weak. And I'm not good at drafting running backs. I think if we look at the receivers next week, I'm much better at drafting receivers than I am at running backs. So lean into it. Do what you do well. Don't do what you don't do well.
The too long didn't read version. Don't pay attention to Joel's running back rankings in 2023.
Unless it's Khalil Herbert or Devin Singletary or Ramondre Stevenson.
Yes, I want to come back to this at some point because I think there is a lesson of how to use Joel's rankings for 2023. So as part of this conversation, I want to talk a little bit about the history of players repeating as the RB1 from season to season. And I did not tell any of my fellow co-hosts on this episode the answer to this question. I have it on my phone. So I want to see if anybody from memory can guess who the last running back to repeat as the RB1 in PPR scoring. And the PPR scoring is a bit of a contingent here. Last running back. Josh.
I was just gonna say Priest Holmes. Damn it.
I also had
come
Priest
up.
Holmes on the brain. So.
Well, it had come up so much before the season.
How did you?
Because
It came up
everyone
a
who
lot
hated
before the
Jonathan
season.
Taylor this offseason like stood up and like I haven't heard Priest Holmes' name since like NFL 2K5 was out.
Yeah.
And now everyone was like, remember how good fucking Priest Holmes was, dude? Like how good he was? Jonathan Taylor will never be Priest Holmes. Like all of a sudden Priest Holmes became like the greatest running back to ever exist for a while, like this offseason. And everyone like yelled at me about it. And I was like, I didn't say Jonathan Taylor was the running back when I said Najee Harris, which was terrible. Like it was even worse. Like
But no, yeah, I saw it in your show notes. I was like, I don't think Austin remembers how much hype this was getting before the season.
oh my God, people were like animals about it.
Yeah, all the anti Jonathan Taylor 101 people were like, it hasn't happened since Priest Holmes. It's been 20 plus years. But when you take someone at 101, obviously you want them to be the RB1 or the wide receiver one. But you're just betting on odds, and clearly the odds were not on Jonathan Taylor's side, but I figured he was still a top 5 back.
I feel like when you draft a guy first overall, you're banking on him being top 5 at that position,
Exactly.
like a lock for the top 5. That's what you're trying to do. You're not like at the 101 being like, you know what, it's going to happen. Like, I'm going to like fuck history. And like, you're just trying to go for like stability.
Yeah.
Which doesn't exist at the running back position. You want stability, draft Justin Jefferson first overall for the next 10 years. Like that's how you lock in your guy.
I
But
mean,
Chris alluded to it. This wasn't a Jonathan Taylor problem. This is a Colts problem, right? Their offensive line just collapsed.
That could be the
really
tagline
good
for the
to
friggin'
just
franchise,
pathetic.
though.
Yeah, Matt Ryan collapsed with the line. They had no, nothing to take anyone off the line. They couldn't throw deep. They couldn't do anything. He's still super talented. I'm still going to I'm not going to take him, but I will rank him high next year.
I'm not going to draft him.
I hope he
Fair.
falls. I mean, I'd love if he
That's
fell to me in the late first, but
The touchdown regression killed him because he still averaged 4.5 yards a carry. He wasn't very involved in the passing game in 2021 when he was the RB1, so the passing game stuff doesn't bother me at all. It's just the touchdown regression, and we've harped on it year after year that it's hard to predict. Austin Eckler's an ebb and flow guy. It seems like the only person who's relatively consistent at scoring touchdowns is Aaron Jones anymore. So everybody else, you don't know what you're getting.
Or you draft running backs that consistently catch passes,
Well, yes.
like Christian McCaffrey,
and Leonard Fournette.
apparently. Okay, well, since you all ruined my trivia question, I'm going to throw
Yeah.
a twist at y'all and say, okay, there are two other players that have repeated as the RB1, but in non-PPR scoring. Can anybody name those two players?
Todd
Emmitt
Gurley's
Smith.
one. Todd
Okay.
Gurley's one.
And
Do
LaDainian
you
Tomlinson
win?
must be the other one.
There you go.
Yeah, say Gurley would have been what, 17 to 18?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was 05 to 0. It was 05 to 06, I think, for LaDainian
Close.
Tomlinson.
06, 07, but he was perennially in the top 3 to 5 each season.
Man threw
How far
touchdown
did you go
passes,
back,
too.
Listen?
1999, as far back as I could.
Okay, come on.
I
Some
mean-
of us remember the 90s.
All right, so he went back to when there were 32 teams in the NFL,
I
not
went-
8.
I went back to where I
When
had
dinosaurs
access to
roamed
the
the earth.
data.
We went over this last week, some of you. There are some of us here who 1999, we don't even remember. We don't
just
even
went
remember that
off
year.
of the data that's available on fantasy data, and it just doesn't go preach for 2000.
Because
It's
the
just,
internet didn't
all right.
exist.
Yeah.
yeah,
I
Y2K
say-
happened.
I think fantasy data stops themselves at 20 years, or if it's always 2002. I don't know which it is, but
Yeah. Well, never mind. I won't go into a weird data nuance right now. So, who's going to be the RB1 next year? Who's our pick at this point? Ryan, we're mock drafting soon. Who are you taking as your first running back this year?
yep. No, it's
Agreed.
it's McCaffrey right now. Again, I'm statistically, I want the guy who's most likely to finish in the top 5, and Christian McCaffrey on the San Francisco 49ers is very likely to finish in the top 5. So if I'm 101, it's CMC.
I love it. Joel, if you're 101, you're picking a receiver. But if you told somebody to
Yes.
pick a running back, which
Or
running
quarterback.
back are you picking? Or quarterback? Ooh, I like it.
Saucy.
In Superflex, I would go Eckler. I don't know any reason to go away from that right now. But obviously, we just talked about the repeat. But that offense should be more interesting next year, and so I think he should get more pieces of that pie. I'll say Eckler.
Anybody have a way too early candidate outside of Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler? Steve, how did I know?
I gotta say it. If he heals up, he's ready to go for the season. Give me Brees Hall right at the top. That is my guy through and through.
I think Gator's comment deserves to go on the screen right now, which I'm the one. Oh, I don't know.
Ooh, I've been seeing this.
That offense is going to continue to get more and more interesting. So
Yes. Also, we should throw up Mr. Scampers, Travis Kelsey. We're going to talk about the name thing later.
yeah, that's weeks away. Weeks away from that fight.
I like this one though. This is a good pick.
Well, and that's what I talked about on our mock draft. Is he's my 102. If McCaffrey's gone, Travis Kelsey is my next option. I just think the positional advantage is unbeatable, and it's like we talked about with McCaffrey. And Josh, you said this so well. We overthink Christian McCaffrey. He's one of the only running backs who can score 20 fantasy points relatively easily on any given week.
Without touchdowns.
He creates superflex in non-superflex leagues. He is your second quarterback. Literally, sometimes he throws touchdown passes.
There it is.
So-
There's the comment right there. Slap that newest one right on the screen. That's the next pick if you're not taking CMC right there. There it is. Good job. Right there. Travis.
You saw what
Kelce.
Justin Jefferson did in
Travis
his last
Kelce.
4 games, right?
Travis Kelsey is old enough to be my dad at this point. Stop it.
That matters.
You did this last year, and we're going to talk about it. in
Yeah,
2
that's
weeks
gonna be
when
a
we
fun
talk
show.
tight ends.
I'm not even
Something
afraid
tells
of
me
it.
that-
I'm not even afraid of it. I own the take
Something
as
tells
is.
me that audition's about to get rescheduled for 2 Thursdays.
If I wasn't getting married in 2 Thursdays, I'd be on to talk some Travis Kelce with you, Steve.
Yeah.
I'm not even afraid. I'm out on Travis Kelce next year already. Book it. I'm out.
It worked so well in
All right.
2022. Let's ride it again.
I will say with the McCaffrey talk, if you talk about the guy I'm going to be in on for 0 RB next year, it's Elijah Mitchell.
Ooh.
Of course.
I'm going to have a
contrarian
shit ton of
bastard.
Elijah Mitchell next year.
No, absolutely.
Because
That's all right.
when they were there before Mitchell got hurt, they were sharing. It was an even timeshare.
Yeah.
With Kyle Shanahan.
And I mean, he vultured 2 touchdowns in a important Week 17 game. Like they're using him in games where it matters. So
Yeah, it's true, and it honestly really bit me in the ass in some best ball playoff leagues I had, where I either had Christian McCaffrey or I had Elijah Mitchell, one or the other, and it was just like neither of them vultured each other enough to get me to advance, which was really unfortunate. Speaking of unfortunate things, let's talk about my take on Najee Harris this year. We don't need to spend a ton of time on this.
Oh yeah.
The perk of being the host. He's like,
You find a way to weasel out of it, huh, Austin?
But I do need to eat some crow on my Najee Harris love last season, as does Steve, who had Najee Harris at RB1.
Like, you want to throw me any harder under that bus with you? Thank you. I'm happy.
Oh, I at least moved Christian McCaffrey above Najee Harris. That's all I'm saying. I did have Najee Harris as RB2, though.
I thought we were in this together. What just happened?
Najee finished as the RB16, which honestly, I am still freaking surprised that is where he finished, given how
didn't feel
out
that
on
way.
him. It did not feel like that. He was RB20 on a points per game basis, which explains a little bit why I didn't feel like he ended up as the RB16. I'm going to turn to Steve first because, we were in this together. We thought Najee Harris was going to be a thing. I wrote a whole article about how it's like, oh, he could be the RB1. So I'm going to turn to you, Steve, and then I'm going to also go to Ryan because Ryan also ranked him fairly high. But Steve, what was up with Najee Harris this year?
All right, so Najee Harris suffered from what, and the shocking thing is that the same problem is going to persist next year. That offensive coordinator has to be like Matt Canada, should be like exiled there for good, for life, should never be allowed to come back to the United States. Just send him off and never allow him to coach football again. He is the most predictable play caller I've ever seen in my life. I legitimately believe I could step onto the field as a defensive coordinator and call a perfect game against them. It's like, oh, they're going to run it up the middle on first down. Okay, cool. Then it's like, all right, did they gain anything more than 5 yards? No. Okay, so they're going to run a drag route underneath, and they're going to send one guy deep, one guy shallow, and nothing else is going to happen. And then third down, they're just going to chuck a jump ball to either George Pickens or Deontay Johnson. It was the ugliest offense in the NFL. It was awful. I don't know what. Mike Tomlin's too loyal. And I don't put any of it, like, Mike Tomlin's a great football coach. This team wildly overperformed considering, like, the deficiencies they had on that offensive line, at quarterback, at, like, play call. It was just bad. It was bad. And I don't buy George Pickens either. Like, I think we're everyone's hyping him up like a ton too. It was just like an ugly offense. It wasn't really on Najee Harris. I don't feel like he had that foot injury, and that was like a whole thing that didn't come up. Had I known he had a broken foot, I guess I probably would have been like, yeah, he probably isn't going to do that well. But I didn't. So, anytime that Liz Frank injury comes up, I'm like, oh, the thing that destroyed Cam Newton, like, I don't know. It probably is going to have some impact. But I don't know. I'm salty as fuck.
That's what I wanted to bring up is the Liz Frank injury because from week 6 on, Najee was actually the RB11. So he was still an RB1, even with, the real basic offense, basic predictable play calling. He wasn't, he didn't even live up to your RB1 or RB2 takes. But I think there's some upside here because people are going to swing too far to the other way. Because it did take a few weeks for him to, actually start looking good.
Yeah, but I agree. I do think Najee, though, after watching him for another season, even when he was fairly healthy, he lacks an explosiveness that you absolutely need in the NFL. Like Najee Harris, and I can't believe I'm about to say this because it sounds like blasphemy to me even, is like David Montgomery. Just a little bit better.
I love David Montgomery. So that's just going to get me a double down.
We know, Austin. We know.
David Montgomery's bad. David Montgomery, Joe Mixon, and Najee Harris are all the same person.
Okay, well, put all of them have
Mixon
an
is a
RB1
far
season.
better running back than both of those people.
No, he's not. No, he's not. What has he ever done that shows that he is? He has no breakaway speed. He can barely catch the ball well. He runs into the offensive line and goes nowhere more than anyone I've ever seen. He's not good either. And we're fooled into thinking he's good because he's on an elite offense. He holds them back. He holds that offense back.
He also catch passes.
He kind of catches passes, not much, not as much as he should, but he's not good. He's not that good.
I do want to come back.
75% of the passes thrown his way this year, 400 yards, I think puts him top 5 at the running back position.
He's a beneficiary of volume more than efficiency. Like he's not that good.
Fantasy football is all about talent. And
I know, but I'm not talking
volume
fantasy football.
king.
I'm talking about real football. They are the same player.
Well, we're
they
talking
lack
about
explosiveness. Like slam them into the line, they're gonna get like 3 yards. If he falls in the end zone a couple times because Jamar Chase gets tackled at the 1, good for him, I guess, but he's not good.
5 times in one game.
5 times in one game.
I do want to come back to Chris's point because it is very on the nose that Chris would be the one defending Najee Harris as I'm like getting as far away from Najee Harris as possible because we actually made a trade in our club dynasty league this year where I traded away Najee Harris and a 2024 4th round pick for Rachaad White and a 1st round pick in this next draft. And, you know, I feel pretty good about that at this point. I'm probably going to lose to Chris next year. Chris probably does too. Exactly.
I think the part that worries me most about Najee is even with the poor quarterback play, poor wide receiver play, and I guess it really wasn't poor wide receiver play, but poor offense, he still faced the 27th most, or I guess 5th fewest stacked boxes of any running back in the NFL and still wasn't hitting 4 yards per carry. So I completely agree with Steve's point on the lack of explosiveness. When I watched him play this year, I got legitimately more and more concerned. And I'm going to throw you back under the bus, Austin, because I started off low on Najee Harris. And as the editor of Club Fantasy, I read your article and I'm like, holy shit, I'm way too low on this guy. And then I just keep bringing him up. But you have great notes in here that you haven't got to yet. The lack of usage in the passing game, especially after what we saw in 2021, it made almost no sense. And that is, I think, for those of us who do projections, I think that was the Achilles heel when it came to Najee Harris, because if you give a guy 80 to 90 targets, they're going to shoot up your rankings. It's just the way it works. And then when they only hit 50 fucking targets, like targets never affected me with Jonathan Taylor because I never gave him more than 60. I gave him too many touchdowns. But with Najee, I actually damn near called his yards right, called his touchdowns on the nose, but I gave him 40 more targets than he ended up with. And that just kills you at that point because a target is just so much more valuable than a carry. And so I think the biggest outlier, and Steve had another great point here with Matt Canada, is what offense do we see next year? Because if it's a non-passing offense to Najee, even if he's the RB11 over the last 11 games of the season, I'm out at a 3rd round ADP. Now, if he starts to fall, things get interesting.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting because we're about to talk about the exact opposite case in our next player. But to just call out those stats you were referencing, Ryan, from 2021 to the 2022 season, Najee Harris saw a 45% decrease in targets and receptions and a 30% decrease in PPR points. So he basically had half the targets from the previous season. In 2021, he had the 3rd most receptions among running backs and then just completely tanked this year. And the Steelers, they started using a running back by committee way more than they did the prior season, which definitely took away opportunities from Najee Harris. But speaking of taking away opportunities from players, DeAndre Swift had many opportunities taken away from him. Yeah. He's the next player we're going to talk about. DeAndre Swift, he finished as RB21 overall and finished as RB16 on a points per game basis and was listed as a top 10 running back in our consensus rankings, but he ended up finishing outside the top 20. So I'm going to start with Joel because Joel was big on DeAndre Swift this year in his rankings. You ranked DeAndre Swift as your RB6. So Joel, where do you think it went wrong with DeAndre Swift this year?
I'll say for me, it's because I don't watch Hard Knocks and because I didn't see how much Dan Campbell's sweet baby loves Jamal Williams. So yeah, I mean, I guess one of my weak spots is I go with talent. I rank players on talent way more than situation, and that's probably something I need to get away from. DeAndre Swift is super talented. I don't think anyone's going to question that. He's in a terrible situation, and on some levels he's made his own bed, and that he can't stay healthy. And I don't think that coaching staff trusts him to stay healthy, and so they're going to kind of kid gloves him, and I think they've shown that's what they're going to do going forward. So I'm certainly not going to be as high on him next year as I am. And that was a guy in Dynasty going forward. In Dynasty going forward, I think he's lost a ton of value. So, I mean, he was probably a top 5 Dynasty value running back going into this year. You can't even get a first-round pick for him at this point. So that's a problem.
I traded him in the 2 Dynasty leagues that I had him in. I got a semi-decent return on both, so I'm not angry about it, but it's definitely disappointing to see that, he can't move and just can't stay healthy.
Frustrating players to have to watch because he's so talented. And the Lions, all right, that's another narrative we got to stop. The Lions aren't a good team. The Lions are like made up of a team of like, when you played sports as a kid and there was that one kid who was like an absolute head case and like smashed into a wall, like without thinking about it, like, or he didn't care how hurt he was. It was just like a team full of like really tough players, but not that talented. And all Dan Campbell likes is like players who want to like go wild on the field and like just attack somebody. When you had a guy in DeAndre Swift who averaged like the second most yards per touch in the NFL, I think, like the second most, like the Lions were way worse than their record showed. They played a couple teams tough, but they played in a bad division. Don't even try to sell me on the Minnesota Vikings. We saw what frauds they were. Like the Packers were bad, Bears were bad, Vikings weren't good. That was a weak division with a weak team, and they overperformed, and they'll be bad next year. I see people like being like, Lions are going to the Super Bowl. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're not going to the playoffs. They're not going to the Super Bowl.
We clearly follow different people, Steve, because I have not seen that take.
Oh, my God. It's like, sometimes I just like to check in on fandoms to see how they're doing.
I will 100% say the Lions could easily win their division next year.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
I think they just wildly overperformed this year. I think like the Packers will be bad, add a couple pieces to the Bears, and they're going to be better. The Vikings will probably still win that division. And the Lions are going to be bad again. Like, they're not going to get that much better. They traded away their, like, second best receiver. Like, they don't like flashy players. They like Jamal Williams over DeAndre Swift. They like blocking tight ends instead of TJ Hawkinson. It's a weird system that's going on.
Who did they trade away?
Who did they trade away?
TJ
I
Hawkinson.
think you're referring to Hawkinson.
Oh, my God. I was like, what are you?
I was like, Jameson Williams.
Pass catcher.
I'm like, there is nobody on that team better than Shark or Jameson Williams for them to get rid of.
Yeah, it's just a weird team. I just don't think Dan Campbell's like I think he's a really good motivator and a really weird offensive. Like, I just don't think he has like the schemes going.
I'll give you that. I think they're going to live and die on Jared Goff. And if they can somehow swing the NFL to get 10, 11, 12 home games next year, they're going to be the best team in the league.
I think Dan Campbell almost is a victim of his own loyalty. And you see that with coaches a lot. Like, you'll see them become hyper loyal to like certain guys, and like Jamal Williams, Jared Goff. Those are the kind of guys you don't want to hitch your horse to. That's not the guy that's going to get your franchise moving forward. You need DeAndre Swift to get going, and you need a better quarterback to move forward. We've seen where Jared Goff can make a team. Like, and honestly, McVay had to like pull a ton of smoke and mirrors to get him to look half decent.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the Lions win more games than they lost this year after a huge turnaround?
And
so that's all right. So that's my point, right? Is that they overperformed and their schedule reflects like their record looks better than it should. They're not as good as their record indicates. They played in a very
you talk about this. You talk about this lack of talent, and then, they have a lot of money to spend this year. They're already on the upswing, and they have 2 first-round picks, one of them being a top 10 pick from us. I'm not saying Lions are going to win the Super Bowl, but
yeah, they're not going to win the Super Bowl. I think they make the playoffs. I will have Marlia's hard-earned cash on the Detroit Lions winning their
I would say if I had to bet right now, I would say the Lions miss the playoffs next year.
Whew.
Just to back up Steve a little bit, I mean, next year the NFC does have to play their extra game on the road, so they won't have that. They will play more road games than they will home games.
Damn it! Never mind. I'm not wasting.
And they have a
It's one game, Ryan. It's one game. Calm down.
Well, and this narrative that Detroit would have been a dangerous playoff team is nonsense. They would have gotten destroyed by the 49ers.
Yeah.
The 49ers would have run all over them. It would have been 40-7.
I don't know. I mean, Dan Campbell doing fake punts on 4th downs is a little bit scary to me in the playoffs.
The Jared Goff home versus away splits are something to
oh my word.
Just literally, it's insane.
They're a team with a great offensive line. I mean, probably second only to Philly.
Yeah,
that's a good thing to have, but they're a terrible road team. They were minus 48 point differential on the road before the Packer game, so they ended up minus 44 or something like that.
Yeah,
even though they went, whatever 4-4, they were a bad road team.
Yeah,
and that's obviously played out, and it's going to be exacerbated next year with the extra road game.
They're a big team that could just regress next season and look bad.
Getting back to DeAndre Swift, I have a stat that I pulled for everyone because he's like the reverse case of Najee Harris, where Najee Harris, we just saw like no receiving value, and Swift, it was like all receiving value. And I started looking at the numbers, and I found this one really interesting. Out of the running backs that finished in the top 30 in PPR scoring, only 2 running backs have less than 100 rushing attempts. DeAndre Swift is one of them. He had 99 rushing attempts.
Gotta be McKinnon.
Jerick McKinnon is the other with 72 rushing attempts. What is more interesting to me is the gap between those two and the next 3 fewest rushing attempts. So at number 3, Gibson had 145 rushing attempts, Antonio Gibson. So he had 50 more rushing attempts than DeAndre Swift. Then is followed by Raheem Mostert, who had 170 rushing attempts, and then Devin Singletary, who had 177 rushing attempts. DeAndre Swift was carried by the fact that he caught the ball this season. Yeah. So really briefly, I want to just figure out, what are we doing with DeAndre Swift next year?
Praying that the Lions trade him.
I'm going to go to Chris, who's not a hater of the Lions, and ask you, Chris, what are you doing with DeAndre Swift next year in redraft?
So I like the Lions. I like what they're doing, but I don't like DeAndre Swift as a fantasy asset. I think I was bullied in the offseason to put him at RB12, and I was the lowest out of all 6 of us on DeAndre Swift. I saw this from last year, 2021, where he was way more involved and way more effective in the passing game than he was in the running game. And I just think it's more of a team committee kind of thing. Like Jamal Williams was good in the red zone. He was good on the 10 zone. There's a reason why he had so many touchdowns. It's not that like he wasn't converting. For Swift, I'm not touching Swift next year. He'll probably end up being a mid RB2 if he stays healthy, but that's something I'd just try and stay clear of.
Yeah. Josh, you feel any differently?
No, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think he's and Ryan and I and Joe, we've talked about this on Wednesdays, but like I feel like Swift is somebody that, because we're, sucked into this like Twitterverse that everybody plays Dynasty, so everybody like lives and dies on their Dynasty takes. Like they're going to continue to keep ranking Swift high because they believe in the talent and they just want to forget about the situation that he's in. Talent wise, sure, he's probably a top, 7, 8, 9 running back in the NFL, but there are some running backs that just aren't built to be 300 touchbacks. I'm fairly certain that Swift at this point probably isn't 150 touchback. Like he's going to touch the ball as a receiver because that's where he's so dangerous, because you get him in space. He doesn't have to think. When he's trying to run between the tackles, he's overthinking and he's trying to always go for that big play, and it gets into his head. So someone like Swift, you kind of just need to use him in more efficient situations. So sure, could he spike as like a top 10 RB? Absolutely. But it's going to rely on touchdowns. And as long as Jamal Williams is in Detroit, which he is a free agent this year, so who knows, that touchdown upside's not going to be there for Swift. So I feel like his ceiling is more top 15. So I'm probably not drafting him until, RB 20 range, 25 range.
Go ahead, Chris.
Hypothetically, if Williams walks, Detroit uses some day 2 capital for a big bruising back like that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Because
and then Swift falls right back into the same spot.
well, and that's what I was
There's
gonna say.
no way they're letting him walk. Zero chance. Zero.
Daniel
I don't
would
think they
give
do.
part of his
I don't
salary
think
to
they
keep
do
Jamal
either,
Williams.
but-
There's no way he wouldn't.
He's not going to command that much money. They have a ton of cap space. He's
Yeah,
not
like I
going
said,
anywhere.
I don't think he goes anywhere either, unless Aaron Jones is gone from Green Bay and home comes a call-in to Jamal Williams, because don't
Jamal
forget, he
Williams
didn't wanna leave
never
there
felt
either.
the love in Green Bay
Oh,
that he
you're
felt in
completely
Detroit.
wrong by
No,
his
no,
own
no.
quote.
No, yeah, he absolutely did. He
Yeah,
still loves
so,
him.
You think he'd choose
so
them over Detroit, where he just had his best career year?
if the money's
He'll go
right,
where the money is. Green Bay's
Yeah.
not going to give him the money.
Yeah.
I agree.
Green Bay
I agree.
can't
But
give
I
him the
did
money
want to
that
throw out
Detroit can.
there, this is the biggest word of caution to give to our listeners to protect themselves on the draft, because we're all in agreement on this. If Jamal Williams does leave, the bad fantasy prognosticator is going to be like, look at all the touchdowns DeAndre Swift can score next year. And they're going to jack him up in their rankings, and they're going to overdraft him. Don't fall for it.
Not
In
to
our
overdraft.
most recent mock,
Vacated touchdowns are not a thing,
Yes.
people.
in our only mock that we did a few weeks ago, with recency bias in full effect, DeAndre Swift was the RB12 taken off the board. That is only going to get worse as people forget how bad this season was, and so much worse if Jamal Williams leaves. So I love everything we've thrown out there, and we all agree. Just be very weary of
I don't
Yeah.
hate it if
I
DeAndre
love
Swift,
that.
if they don't draft a day 2 running back. Like if Jamal walks, DeAndre's there, and
I
they
just think
don't
they're
draft a
going
day
to,
2.
though.
But if they don't, or they take some journeyman running back to bring him in, I like Swift a little bit more. But that
Yeah.
first, second round value that he held it's dead. It's dead in the
No,
water,
that's-
right? Like
that's
it's
so
no
true.
more.
Speaking of dead in the water, my RB2 takes were awful this year, and we're going to get to our running back 2 rankings. So our consensus rankings for running back 2 this year starts with Ezekiel Elliott at RB13, Nick Chubb at RB14. Hey, I was right on him. I listened to our show, listened back, and I said y'all should be higher on Nick Chubb, and that one panned out, but everything else is kind of crap. RB15, we had Breece Hall, followed by Travis Etienne at 16, Antonio Gibson at 17, Leonard Fournette at 18. We just mentioned he ended up as an RB1 this year. We had James Conner at 19, Josh Jacobs all the way down at RB20. The disrespect we had for him. Won't fall for that again. We had AJ Dillon at RB21. We're going to talk about him. David Montgomery at 22, J.K. Dobbins at 23, and Chase Edmonds at 24.
delete the internet. I don't ever want to hear that again.
When I
Chase
saw that, I had to
Edmonds.
do a double take to try and remember where he started the season because I literally couldn't.
It was Miami, right?
Miami, yeah.
Oh, whew. Yeah, what a ride.
We believed in
In
the
fairness, Joel, you actually were highest on him. So
Because
No,
he's
excuse
a
me,
zero.
It was Steve.
He's a
My
zero
apologies.
RB dream.
Yo,
It was
all right,
Steve, my
yeah,
apologies.
I will own that. I was the highest on Chase. Yo, they threw the money at him. They came out of free agency. The
100%.
first guy to sign was
Oh, yeah.
Chase Edmonds. All
Yeah,
these
you would
names
think.
were out there, and it was like Chase Edmonds just signed with the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah,
Like,
it
that
worked for
motherfucker.
Christian Kirk. It just didn't work out well
Right.
for Chase Edmonds.
So Chase
And
Edmonds
then
was not
Mike
RB24,
McDaniel, though,
but
he has
who
that
was
swag, I believe.
who was in our RB2, who did finish as RB2. First off, Jamal Williams as RB13. Shout out to Jamal Williams. RB14, Miles Sanders. Never thought I'd see the day, especially after he told us not to draft him.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was a dick move.
RB15 was Alvin Kamara. Najee Harris, my man, fell all the way to 16. Travis Etienne did finish RB17. We were pretty close on that one. RB18 was Kenneth Walker. RB19, we got exactly correct, y'all. James Conner. I am
Whoa.
shocked by that because I was so down on James Conner. But hey, we did it. Jerick McKinnon, RB20. DeAndre Swift fell to RB21. Ezekiel Elliott fell all the way to 22. Devin Singletary at 23. And my man David Montgomery kept it somewhat relevant at RB24.
The most average man in the NFL.
Hey, So we're going to talk actually about someone who was not in our top 24 as in our RB1 and RB2 rankings, but he was in our top 25, and that was Cam Akers. And the reason I want to talk about Cam Akers is because he was a player that I think folks were either really high on or really not on this past offseason, because he performed pretty well in the 2021 playoffs for a couple games here and there, had some big rushes, and people are like, oh yeah, he's coming back from that Achilles RB1 season. He finished RB 35 and RB 40.
Oh, hey, I got that right on the money. That's awesome.
Nice. RB 40 on a points per game basis, and he was just outside of our RB2 consensus rankings. No one from our consensus rankers had him as an RB1, but Steve and I actually were highest on him at RB 18. Chris had him at RB 21. Josh, Ryan, and Joel were all much lower on him. Josh had him at RB 35, Ryan at 39, and Joel at 31. So I want to come to you, Josh. Josh, why were you out on Cam Akers this year?
Well, the Achilles was the big reason. But I know, Ryan and I, obviously we talk a lot because we do quite a few shows together.
Yeah.
Really? Do you two know each other?
Just a little bit. We were both really out on Akers. Just, the playoff run last year coming back from the Achilles was just not great. It takes running backs a long time to really bounce back from this injury. I mean, just look at Deonta Foreman, how great he was this year. He came into the league 7 years ago, tore his Achilles in his rookie year. That's essentially how long it takes for running backs to truly regain their explosiveness. So it was an easy fade for me from that perspective. But at the same time, we know this McVay system and how it can be beneficial to running backs. Obviously, I didn't foresee him throwing a temper tantrum in the middle of the season and wanting to get traded. And then, them outright just releasing Darrell Henderson, which I still don't understand. But, they said, look, we're just going to ride it out with Akers. We're going to see what happens. And, he had a decent finish to the season. I still don't think it was like anything to be like, all right, now I got to pencil this guy in for a top 20 finish in 2023. But there's at least some light at the end of the tunnel that, if he continues to strengthen himself and get back into the right mindset and the Rams make the necessary moves on the offensive line, we could see a top 20 finish from Cam Akers. But, that offense just, it runs through Cooper Kupp. There's just, for me, there wasn't an opportunity really for Cam Akers to be a true bell cow at that point.
Yeah. But with that, I do want to turn to Ryan, because I feel like Cam Akers, he was a player that was kind of a trap this year. That if you were in on him and you went early, you just fell hard. And I feel like because there were some polarized views on him, there were some folks that kind of saw this coming and were like, not really as in on him. And with him having kind of the breakout, quote unquote, towards the end of the season, I could see people selling themselves on Cam Akers again. And so my question for you, Ryan, is Akers a trap again this year, or is there reason for optimism?
It's going to depend a lot, I think, on what the Rams do on calling him a full-out trap. My concern is, Josh already stated my concern. When I wrote a complete article against Cam Akers, and then we were lucky enough to have Stefania Bell on our show that exact same week, so I got to ask a question about the injury, and she talked about how they were putting like a brace on his Achilles, and she had no idea how players were going to react to that. And just her not knowing, because Stefania Bell knows everything, trust me, her not knowing was enough for me to feel very validated in my article. And then when I went back and looked at Deonta Foreman, at, why am I forgetting the other person who did it, Josh? Recent Achilles injury. Who can I not think of?
Is it Marlon Mack?
Marlon Mack. There you go.
There you go.
So when I looked at these guys, and Marlon Mack, the year he was back, was a healthy scratch in more games than he played. And Deonta Foreman took all those years and didn't really start to shine again until he was very much a backup to Derrick Henry. And even then, they still let him walk in favor of other guys. And so you're just thinking, and then Deonta Foreman finally year 7 blows up. That's what concerns me about Cam Akers. We're heading into year 2 after the injury, not year 5, 6, or 7, like when we saw Deonta Foreman return to form. And what really jumped out at me at the stats were those guys statistically were very similar running backs before they got hurt. They were all like 4.6, 4.7, 4.8 yard per carry guys. And when they came back, they were all like sub 3.5 yards per carry guys. And so my concern is, unless Cam Akers is in a perfect offense, and Chris would be able to speak better to what position the Rams will be in next year versus this year with offensive line play and hopefully a more efficient Matt Stafford, he's not going to be in favorable matchups enough where I think his body's going to be able to create opportunity for him to do big things. He's going to have great weeks. He's going to have 3 touchdown weeks as long as he's on the field. It's just not going to be enough where I'm going to be willing to draft him. And you hit the nail on the head again, because it's what he's done every year of his career. He's setting the trap to end the season. He's going to get overdrafted. If he would have just been shitty to end the season and fell to the 7th, 8th, 9th round next year, it might have been okay. He's probably a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick again next year, and I'm all the way out once again.
If you fell to 7, 8, or 9, we're talking about Joel's territory here.
Yeah. That is the perfect. That is what I was going to say, Chris.
Bring it on.
You know why I was going to say that, Chris? Because Cam Akers, if he does fall, he becomes a 0 RB strategist dream. And you know who else was that dream for players this year? It was supposed to be AJ Dillon. But AJ Dillon, we had him ranked as RB21, which is some love for AJ Dillon.
I had him in so many leagues.
Oh,
it was
yes.
devastating.
I think I punted running back for a while, and Scott Fishbowl was like, "Oh yeah, AJ Dillon, let's go!" And whew,
yeah,
he finished as RB25 overall, but RB36 on a points per game basis, which I think is really what kind of killed you with AJ Dillon this year. But AJ Dillon is a darling of 0 running back players, and so I want to turn to our resident 0 RB drafter, Joel, because Joel, you had him ranked at RB15 this year, and just talk about why you liked AJ Dillon this year and where you think it went wrong. Oh, you're also a resident Packers fan?
I was going to say, this is a double whammy.
I'll push back on AJ Dillon being a 0 RB guy because he was getting drafted too high to be a true 0 RB guy.
See, I never, every time I talk to you about 0 RB, Joel, you're like, yeah, that's still too high, Austin. I'm like, okay, I haven't gotten there yet.
Like the top of the curve was like Devin Singletary. Anything above that was you're not a true.
If you drafted a running back, you drafted them too high. Joel likes to wait till week 5 and then pick up running backs from there. Otherwise, it's too early.
Exactly. So I liked Dillon a lot this year because I was wrong about Aaron Rodgers being willing to give in and play the Matt LaFleur offense, and it didn't happen. He kept playing the Aaron Rodgers offense. And so, not to get back into what we talked about last week, that's why I think he's going to go somewhere where he can be the offensive coordinator. Anyway, I think the Dillon thing, and this is a personal theory, is that he got a little too caught up in his Quadzilla deal, and he became that. He almost became a caricature of himself. He was slow. He looked slow this year. I before the season, I kind of compared him to, or said he was going to be the next Derrick Henry, and he was not that at all. I mean, he was noticeably slower. So I think he's going to have to go into this offseason and kind of redo his conditioning regimen and become a more well-rounded athlete instead of just being, I've got quads this big. That's awesome. He couldn't hit the hole hard. And that's another Aaron Rodgers issue, is he insisted on playing from shotgun, and AJ Dillon needs the ball moving forward. He needs to get the ball from a quarterback under center, not, hand off and then go. He's got to be going forward when he gets the handoff. So I think AJ Dillon's issues were an offensive issue and not an AJ Dillon issue. So I'll probably be back on him next year once Aaron Rodgers is playing somewhere else.
Yeah, I love that detail. I love that detail about under center versus shotgun play. I would be really interested to look into the snap counts.
60% of his snaps. I'm literally looking it up as he brought it up. I was like, what a great
he succeeded 100% of the time.
Yeah, 60% of the snaps in shotgun versus 40% under center, which is
I watch all the Packer games. I watch every one of their snaps. It's a noticeable difference with him when he's getting the ball in shotgun and has to take that kind of half step and then go forward. He's not the same guy as when he's going forward, gets the handoff, and then can hit the line and go. It's a noticeable difference.
Same exact split as Aaron Jones, and they should be different backs. At the very least, it should have been 40-60.
Exactly.
That's so interesting.
But that was an Aaron Rodgers insistence on playing from shotgun. And like I said, I thought we'd see more of a Matt LaFleur offense. We still saw an Aaron Rodgers offense this year. That did AJ Dillon no favors.
That is a great observation, Joel.
Yeah. I do think AJ Dillon is going to be somebody interesting to target next year, depending on what happens in Green Bay, because I imagine people are going to be out on him. He could fall further into maybe actually being in zero RB territory.
I think this year he may be an actual zero RB guy.
And next year is a contract year for him. And we know that can be huge for players overperforming.
Yeah, just look at Miles Sanders.
I'm worried that it goes the complete other way. If Rodgers is gone, I think Jones is likely gone as well, and I think AJ Dillon is about to skyrocket.
I disagree with that. I think they love him. I think they will. He's a contract restructure. There's room in his contract to restructure him.
Okay.
So and especially with Rodgers gone, I think they'll have room for him. I think they will keep him.
Okay, good to know.
I mean, there is that
drafting guys in their contract year. That seems to really set them off. That's going to be my entire draft strategy in all redraft formats.
Probably not an awful strategy.
Not an awful one. If I had time last year,
Josh Jacobs just showed us what happens. Josh Jacobs just showed us what happens.
Say Aaron Judge.
Yeah.
Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders. If you had those two like running your running back room, you'd be great. You'd probably win.
Cool. So we're going to talk about one more player just briefly, and then we're going to wrap up the show. I just wanted to shout out Jerick McKinnon because, oh my word, did this man overperform his season, finishing RB20 overall and RB26 on a points per game basis. Here's how low we were on him. Ryan, Steve, and Chris did not rank him. We give our rankers an option to just do the top 50. They didn't rank him at all. Now,
I didn't even know he was still in the league.
Fair enough.
See,
he may not have been technically signed when we did this. That's possible. I don't know when he actually signed.
He signed.
Jerick McKinnon's like that thing from Jeepers Creepers. He kind of pops up like every so often.
He was there the year
years
before,
and like dominates.
Yeah. He was there.
He was there, but he didn't. He had signed a contract this year. He was a free agent going into the year, so he may not have signed by the time we did this.
He was my RB59. I just looked.
Yeah, he was
where he fell for me.
I didn't even bother ranking him. I know I didn't.
Joel had him at RB51. Shout out to Joel. Josh had him at RB61, and I had him all the way down in the lovely land of RB80. Because I was like,
you're worse than me. I had him at 72.
So I might have been the highest on him. Can I claim the victory lap here?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Well,
I was just Jerick McKinnon. He's a playoff guy. Like that is why the Kansas City Chiefs usually use him. Is he comes around and they have some gimmick plays in the playoffs. But they used him this year.
I shared this story before the show. I was going to share it with the viewers. The way we currently do our rankings until I can get everybody in Fantasy Pros, I manually format our rankings completely. And when Joel first added Jerick McKinnon to the top 50, I have to go in and create a whole line to add him. And I was like pissed at Joel for making me create a line for Jerick McKinnon. And this guy's a fucking top 20 running back.
Freaking wild. So Jerick McKinnon, I just like the thing about him, do not fall into the trap. From weeks 13 through 17, he was RB2. It was all touchdown wildness.
I know everybody hates him in the whole world.
I'm still so mad at you guys for not understanding TikTok because I had a funny one I wanted to do and I just couldn't run it by you guys.
But I know everybody hates Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but that man had 3 receiving touchdowns and Jerick McKinnon blew up after he went to the IR. To me, this is a what could have been season for Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Oh, I mean, that's, there's that. With that, though,
I think it was a what could have been season for Travis Kelce because he died in the playoffs and championship.
Touchdowns went
Jerick McKinnon took all his touchdowns.
Warned you.
Yeah.
Warned us what? That he wasn't going to outscore.
Okay, no, 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now, you are going to eat crow. Give us 2 weeks.
I hear nothing.
I'll save it.
Talk to us about Manscaped.
Never mind. Anyway, so this episode has been brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below the waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped recently launched the ultimate men's hygiene bundle, the Performance Package. Performance Package includes the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, the Crop Preserver groin deodorant, the Crop Reviver toner, performance boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold all of your goodies. Best thing about this product, all of the blades that they use, they're waterproof. So it makes things so easy to clean. It helps reduce nicks, cuts, ingrown hairs. So safe, so amazing. Cannot say even better things about it. Like I love it. This partnership with Manscaped has been a lot of fun. Just being able to, hype up good products. Is that right?
We haven't hit on it in a while, but even the presentation from when you open the shipping box is mind blowing. And then the little travel case they come with is just absolutely amazing quality. It's just great stuff.
So join over 5 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer just for you. Head over to manscaped.com, enter promo code CLUBFANTASY at checkout, save yourself 20% and get free shipping worldwide. Go to manscaped.com, enter in promo code CLUBFANTASY, get 20% off right now. Or, when the show ends. However you want to
do it now. You don't need the outro.
You need to know
Manscaped.com.
You need to know where to see us soon because we got some announcements. But other than that, go to Manscaped. Josh, let the people know what they need to know.
Yeah, so we've got some articles popping up over on the website. It's clubfantasyffl.com. This the kind of, I guess, new series, so to speak, that we've started, which kind of wasn't supposed to be a series. But hey, let's roll with it. I love it. How to fix certain teams heading into the 2023 season for fantasy purposes. First article dropped. What was it?
Tuesday.
Yep. Was my
Ryan.
article on how to fix the Chicago Bears. So that was fun. I just finished up my how to fix the Texans offense. So that'll be a fun one.
I bet that took a long time.
Actually, no. I banged out 2,300 words in less than an hour yesterday.
Oh, hey.
I'm just happy you cut a third of the article for me.
Yeah.
But we've got a few more coming up. I know everybody on the team is kind of hopping in on this and taking a dive into some of the teams to kind of, shed their thoughts. So it should be fun. We've got Monday's Anxiety coming back Monday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. Ryan, myself will be reacting to the divisional round and, giving some thoughts and how things should have gone or maybe didn't go or something along those lines. And, prognosticating for what this could potentially mean for the fantasy season in 2023. No Punt Intended will be back on Wednesday. We're continuing a look back series from our look inside previews from over the summer. We're hitting on the next 8 teams on the list. Some of the teams including the Patriots, the Eagles, the Steelers, the Cowboys,
Chargers,
the Raiders, Chargers. There's some good ones in there to definitely talk about from our projections. And then, of course, next week, 7 o'clock Eastern, Thursday, we're diving into our wide receiver rankings, holding ourselves accountable, much like we've done the last 2 weeks here. Just looking over the landscape and seeing where we missed and all that good stuff. So, and then we've got her story in the making with Britt Flynn. Usually it's every 2 weeks. We're taking Tuesday off, and she will be back on February 7th with one of our favorite people in the industry, Lauren Carpenter from NBC Sports Edge, Fantasy Footballers, FTN Fantasy Pros. I don't know.
Everywhere
Throw a
you
rock.
wanna
She
be.
works at the site. So.
Yeah.
I love it. A lot of great stuff going on. Also, if you're trying to hold on to the last little threads of fantasy football for the 2022-2023 season, catch the A-list coming out in the next couple of days. Get you set up for DFS lineups, DFS cash for a divisional weekend. We're going to try and win some more money while we still can before we have to scrounge and get really degenerate with NBA slates and
NHL.
I'll say, and Joel's Blurred Lines is still coming out too. You two are the only two currently doing in-season articles.
That is true.
Oh, yeah. Grind never stops. But we'll be back next week to talk wide receivers. And in the meantime, remember, defense wins championships. Offense wins fantasy football.
Oh, I got it.